My name is Amy Perrin. I am the program director with the Minnesota STAR program, and am so proud of a partnership that North Dakota Assistive and STAR put together about a year ago, and we've been presenting monthly on various topics related to assistive technology. So we welcome you, and I would like to now hand things off to Courtney.
Well, hello. I just want to echo Amy's sentiments. We are so happy to have you on board and really looking forward to having everyone learn from our wonderful presenters. This session is called Mapping the Right Course, Successful Transitions for AAC Users. It will be recorded for those who are unable to attend, or if you just want to get that great information again. You will receive a certificate of attendance within 24 hours after today's presentation. And you will, in that email, also get a copy of the slides and a resource list with all sorts of links for you to access. I am going to move to the next slide and just tell you a tiny bit about your hosts, North Dakota Assistive and Minnesota STAR. We are the statewide AT Act programs for North Dakota and Minnesota. We offer a variety of assistive technology services to help citizens get the AT that they need to work, to succeed in school, to just live independently, to enjoy recreation. So we do that through a variety of means, including assistive technology, device demonstrations, short-term loans, device utilization or giveaway, information and assistance. We do presentations, webinars, short YouTube videos, all sorts of things. So thank you for joining us, and we will let our hosts introduce themselves. Oh, sorry, one more note. If you would like to access the captions for this session, you can do that within the Zoom controls, which are typically located down at the bottom of your screen. If you have any issues, just send us a quick little chat and we'd be happy to address that. Oh, I forgot to mention the session goals. I'm slipping today here. So today's session is about helping students who use AAC successfully transition from school to work and community life. So the 3 session goals are to learn about common roadblocks and solutions to success, key timelines for goal setting, and then 5 strategies/tools for high school and post-secondary things. Okay, I think that's good. Mary.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today during a very busy time of the school year. I am Mary Baumann-Spooner. I am an assistant professor at St. Cloud State University in our CSD program, but I have umpteen years of school experience, primarily working with students with complex communication needs. My financial information is I am employed at St. Cloud State University, and non-financial, I am members of ASHA SIG 12, MNSHA's AAC committee, Isaac USAC on the DEIB committee. And on to our next presenter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Luckow, and I am the lead speech pathologist for secondary in the Anoka Hennepin schools, and then I'm also the AAC specialist on our AT team in Anoka Hennepin. And then I am a speech pathologist also independently working for Technology for Home grant through the Department of Health and through the state of Minnesota. Financially, I am employed with Anoka Hennepin schools. I've been here for 25 years now. Been working as a speech pathologist and with AAC systems for almost 30 years. I am a member of the MNSHA AAC committee, ASHA, and the ASHA SIG 12.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Tetlie. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I worked for St. Paul Public Schools for 34 years, where I led the assistive technology team, and I focused on augmentative communication and assistive technology for reading. I retired in 2020, and since then I've been a member of ASHA and got involved in MNSHA volunteering, and now I currently co-chair the MNSHA AAC committee. We're excited to share with you our years of experience on this topic. So mapping the right course, successful transitions for AAC users. So how do we do that? Well, you need to start off with knowing what the destination is. And that is, how do we make sure that our students have access to their AAC system and to use them effectively after they graduate? Let's just jump in with the challenges. This is going to be nothing new. It's really no secret that there are unique challenges in adolescence, and the top three being establishing a personal identity, becoming independent, and being able to make your own choices. And it's really logical that our adolescents who use AAC would face these same challenges. But in addition to those typical challenges, they have more layers of challenge, those users of AAC. And the importance of physical appearance has been well documented in establishing personal identity for teens, and the cosmetic appearance of the AAC system is an important part of that. So it's important for us to find ways that there is personal choice in the appearance of an AAC system, like the color of the case, the type of strap, and how individuals carry their devices, not to mention the type of device. They can all have a huge impact on the individual's long-term success with the AAC system. We also need to pay particular attention to the social and emotional health of our AAC users. And a meaningful discussion with these teens requires access and practice to vocabulary so that they can discuss complex emotions and worries and aspirations. And a key part of that emotional and mental health support is given by providing a range of access to communication partners and helping them establish a very secure social network. All of this really requires lots of practice to develop communication skills, to build those friendships, and to be able to express their ideas and feelings and preferences clearly with family and friends. Additionally, it's important that we note that those teens who use AAC also have to cope with the fact that they communicate differently than their peers. But more on that in the next slide. So there are numerous roadblocks to navigate in steering your AAC users on a path to success in communication after graduation. And Pat Mirenda tells the story of Keith. He's a teenager with multiple physical and communication disabilities who had a school team and family supports where it appears that he had it all: a powered mobility system, a multimodal communication system where he could proficiently use a speech-generating device, and a great work environment, and then frequently liked him. Fast forward 3 years, he was referred for a new AAC eval and described as an individual who had no means of communication except a few partially intelligible signs. Well, crazy. Further investigation revealed that his speech output device could be found in the hall closet of where he lived, with dead batteries and the 300 plus messages that were customized for him erased. Yikes. And to top it off, none of those support staff that were helping Keith even knew how to turn on the device. Well, what happened in those 3 years to have caused the communication part of his transition plan to fall apart? Well, she talks about how Keith's primary adult agency facilitators, the house parent, the caseworker, and the SLP were all competent in supporting Keith in his communication system, but due to budget cuts, the SLP's services were terminated. The house parent quit to take a new job, and the social worker had been replaced. And the problem was that none of these three had thought to train their successors regarding Keith and the operation and maintenance of his system. This was a crucial missing step. Another roadblock to successful AAC transitions is the aging out of a student's communication device. And in St. Paul, whenever possible, we tried to send out students after graduation with a device in which they were proficient, but in the newest possible condition. This requires a multi-year view of planning the support of an AAC system, and it cannot be addressed in the very last year of their post-secondary training. You really need to also consider that 5-year rule about medical assistance funding in that, but it's really important to send out a really good system in which a student is proficient. Another roadblock that we found was pressure that teens feel to look like their peers. No surprise. Well, we saw this happen in a couple different ways in St. Paul. There were some students who just did not want to rely on a machine or any kind of physical device when they could see others using their natural speech. And sometimes we'd see them be perfectly accepting of not being understood because they preferred to use their natural speech. And that was even when they only had to clarify natural speech with their speech generating device. Well, these students' eyes were only opened after they started spending time at work placements and other community settings where they were communicating with complete strangers. Sometimes it was a first time for students, and they did not realize that they could not be understood and they could not get what they want or communicate what their opinions were to people who did not understand their speech intimately. And so it was only after these experiences that some students started to value their AAC systems and could really get to work on learning to use them effectively in community and work settings. There was another situation where we found our students wanted to be like their peers, and it was caused by, I believe, our one-to-one iPad initiative, where there were a number of students who just shunned their dedicated devices because they really wanted to look like their peers and using iPads. And that was a little trickier. We were able to find a vendor who took medical assistance, and for some we were, if it matched their abilities, we're able to transition them to a device that was unlocked and iPad looking. But that was another issue to deal with. I touched on the training issues that come along with high turnover of staff earlier with Keith's story, and this certainly is an ongoing battle, and it illustrates the importance of involving family members in training with supporting a student's device. We particularly found it helpful when there was a brother or sister who wanted to learn how to help their brother or sister use their device. And then the other step was connecting family and students to company representatives who could be long-term there for them when things went wrong. And then we also found it very important to help caregivers understand that they might be the ones that have to pass on information about the device when all the staff turns over. But we found it just really takes a village. Next slide.
All right, I'm going to go just a little bit and review why we need to think about successful transition from the school into adult life. If we briefly review the law through IDEA, we look at AT being any piece of equipment or item or system that can be used to increase, maintain, and improve a functional capability of a child. And so AAC systems do fall within IDEA. If you go to the next slide. So we must make available to the child assistive technology through special education-related services or supplementary aids and devices. So the AAC systems, and each district does this a little bit differently. Some districts do choose to provide, like Rebecca said, like a one-on-one iPad to each student. Some districts provide certain apps to kids. Some districts go through full medical funding, and we'll get into a little bit of those options later. But no matter how you do it, you are required to provide what the child needs to be successful. If you go to the next slide, there are cases where if the school purchases assistive technology for a student and they need to use it in all settings to make progress on their IEP goals, that we might be sending it home or other settings for them. And the IEP team needs to determine where that needs to be. So again, that's a policy in different districts, whether or not you're sending it home or keeping it at school. But that is something that we do need to consider. If you go to the next slide. One of the most pertinent things to consider during this stage of the IEP process is what services we need to provide. In the upcoming slides, you're going to see as a service provider that you'll need to assist the student's family and outside support agencies and a plan on who's going to take over. So we might be working with the child during school. We might do an evaluation, but if we haven't considered purchasing something for them through their own funding that they can keep, we're going to need to start thinking about that. And then looking at the whole team, who's going to customize, who's going to maintain, like Rebecca said, if we don't consider what systems are in place to train people coming after us, turnover is really high in those transition settings after high school. We know they're high. We know turnover is high in high school. It can be really worse after having been in a lot of group homes and day programs. Staffing is constantly changing. And so coming up with some sort of system to plan is really important. Next page. This law also does say that services are provided coordinating with other intervention services, and providing training and technical assistance is part of what we need to do. So that might include families, outside SLPs, group home staff, personal care assistants, social workers, and more. Anyone who's supporting that person as they move into their adult life is important to consider as part of the team. And I will say it can be a challenge to figure out how to coordinate. Families often won't tell a private SLP that they're getting speech in school, or won't give the school speech pathologist that contact for outside therapy organizations. And so it's really important to start building rapport with families and say, let them know that you're really working towards a long-term goal for their child and what their long-term goals are for their child too. Next. If you have not acquired the AAC system through an outside funding source, such as insurance or nonprofits, Voc Rehab Services can help purchase AT from the school district. So this is kind of an unknown thing, but when a child leaves a district, there is provision in the law for a new district to purchase that system from them, and just as there is provision for nonprofits or state agencies to purchase it. So that's another option if you have purchased it for your child in the school district. An outside agency can take that and purchase it as well. All right, Mary.
Okay, so we've got all these roadblocks. We know the law and what we're supposed to do, but how do you do it? So the next couple slides are pulled directly from a book called Fundamentals of AAC, and they have a wonderful chapter on transitioning students out of the school setting into work and different home community settings. And they really have a wonderful checklist that we will go ahead and share with you on where you start 4 to 5 years early. We know in transition age, in that middle school, junior high school level, you need to be thinking about this. If you try to cram all this in that last year before they age out, you will find that you are behind the 8 ball. It will not work. So you really need to be looking at that 4 to 5 years, start planning, start working with that child on what is their big dream, and we'll talk more about that. And as far as assistive technology devices and services, you really need to be documenting what are those device needs, what are the training needs, and frankly, anybody that's going to be working directly and supporting that student needs training. Don't wait until the end when they're transition age. Get that done right away. And then how are you going to be monitoring that? How are you going to make sure this is being carried out? You want to think that out, because we have the big alphabet soup in the school settings, right? We have at our disposal every single, OT, PT, SLPs, vision impaired teachers, teachers of the deaf, hard of hearing, physical health disability teachers, autism specialists, disabilities persons, psychologists, case managers. We have them all there. When you leave the school system, now it's all separate individual, places that you have to go and find these supports. So making sure the family's ready for that, making sure that we've got a well thought out plan is what we need to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this checklist, besides considering, everybody that you need to include, and that really talks about those outside support agencies. So even in junior high to high school in the St. Cloud School District, we had social workers attending. Of course, as they got older and into high school level, we might start having voc rehab come in, DHH services, vision impaired services. But we start bringing them in. And if they are getting outside, speech, OT, PT services, we worked really hard to collaborate with them so they knew what we were doing in the schools and what we were working on, so that they knew what they were doing. And if families, because in the St. Cloud area, we had a lot of refugees coming in from Somalia, if they didn't know how to get these support services, we worked really hard to help them learn where to seek those out outside of the school setting, because once these students age out, the support's gone. So families need to start making some of these connections early on, long before that last year. Students need to really start working on self-advocacy skills. What do they want to do? Where do they want to live? Do they want to do some certificate training, technical school, four-year college, graduate school? What's their dream? They need a say in it, not what mom and dad is hoping or what they think they can do, but have that student there and advocating for what they want and need. And you need to identify what the needs for that transitioning environment. So I worked with, the severe to profound students that were nonverbal, autism, and many of them were going to be going into group home settings, and they may never work in a work setting. They may go to a day program, they may not, but I needed to make sure everybody understood the communication system and even the etiquette and how to talk with somebody who uses AAC. And so all of that had to be thought in these plans as they transition out. You need to really address that specific equipment and the training and the funding issues. So as we've said before, if you didn't go through an insurance company to pay for that AAC system, and this student is going to be aging out, what type of system will they be using in the future? Start thinking about that. Do you want to go that medical route and use insurance? Do you want to work with voc rehab and just look at if they want to buy that system? Because maybe it's only a couple of years old and there's still, some life in it. But start thinking about that years in advance. Next slide, please. So on the transition checklist, 4 to 5 years prior to, the student aging out. So, we're really talking 8th grade, right? Sometimes 7th, depending on their age. You really want to look at these areas. And I'm not going to go step by step through each one, but I do want to point out the ones when it comes to an AAC system. So yes, you want to know their learning style and accommodations, figure out their career interests and where they were hoping to live in the future. But with that AAC system, don't forget, we need to teach them to communicate their interests, needs, and personal information. One of our biggest worries with many of the adults that I worked with was they were vulnerable. And how do we make sure that they can let somebody know if they get separated from their support personnel, who they are, who they need to call? So you work on those types of skills. If this is an individual that isn't capable of giving that type of information, then what other types of systems do we have in place? Do we have a medical alert bracelet or necklace or something that would have that? But you have to start thinking about that and doing it with that, student and their family and the support agencies all, as a team making these decisions. Next slide, please. Okay, also in that 4 to 5 years prior, be exploring assistive technology tools to increase that community involvement, and figure out those community opportunities. Where can they be communicating that they're not already? Where do they go out with their family, with their friends, and, start working on those communication scripts, if it needs to be broken down into a script? Or where would they find on their communication device, how to keep that conversation going and talking about what they did in their day. But, you want to really think about community outside of school, because suddenly for 6 to 7 hours of their day, they won't be in school. So where else will they be, and have that a focus in some of your goals and objectives? You're also going to, and this will probably be done by other team members, looking at transportation options, money management, getting that ID card, what do they need to do for independent living, and then practicing personal health care. These are all areas of transition. And so as a team, we can break these up and work on different areas, but what do they need to communicate? Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we just got through that big long list. Now we have to start thinking 2 to 3 years out. What are we going to be doing there? And this is when you really want to start thinking about those support services that they're going to need. So voc rehab, is there a plan to start filing for Social Security? What do they need to get medical assistance? What are those support services? Make sure those outside support agencies are sitting at the table by this time for sure. They need to be there. And I love this idea. Have some peers come to these transition meetings. Don't let it all just be this one student with all these adults, but bring in some peers that can also give their perspective, their point of view. Look at career interest and skills for vocational or community work options. I know in the St. Cloud School District, the social workers were very key in helping us identify those. And then think about post-secondary programs for those students that's appropriate, and what supports are offered. I had one student that we went and called the different schools, colleges that she was interested, and we asked through their support services what they offered, to help her, because in that case, it may not just be communication, but what else can they do if there's a reading or a writing type of issue and they need some supports there. And then that identifying healthcare providers and discussing age-appropriate topics. And this was one that many families didn't like me bringing up, and they didn't want to address it, but it's needed. You have to talk about sexuality at this age. You have to talk about family planning. I mean, they're becoming adults. They need to have this information. Next slide, please. All right, so 2 to 3 years, still we're thinking about what type of financial support, like I talked about, but how are you going to use appropriate social skills with the AAC system for different settings? So this is that age where they're no longer primarily talking just with peers. They've got to understand how to talk differently when they're at work, to a customer, to their supervisor. They need to understand when to code switch when they're going into the medical facility, and be prepared ahead of time with some pre-programmed messages to discuss with the doctors and the nurses the issues going, how to advocate for themselves when a care plan is being created for them if they live in a group home. So those are the pieces I can see as an SLP where we really have to start looking at that 2 to 3 years in advance, even sooner. Empower the student for their plan. So it's not a plan that's put upon them, but that they really have a voice in, and, work with them. And those can be your skills or your goals and objectives, along with figuring out their legal status before the age of majority. Will there be a conservatorship? Will there be a guardian? Looking at resume, and having that, kept up and updated, and how are they going to do that? Who's going to support them in doing that? The, living skills, independent living skills, budgets, cooking, cleaning, and then getting that ID personal assistance, or identifying personal assistance services, and how to direct and manage them. So it's not these services are being done to that individual who uses AAC, but they are letting their caretakers know how to help support them in their cares and needs. Next slide, please. Okay, 1 year to go. This is countdown. I can tell you, this is the time that hopefully, since you started 4 or 5 years ahead of time, many things are in place, many trainings and education and information has been, figured out. But if they haven't started applying for those financial supports, boy, they have to now. I know that might even start 2 years in advance, depending on the systems. Practice interviewing. Such an important skill, but if they do want to get a job or they want to get into a particular program, they may need to go through an interview process or advocate for a different way to interview, since they use an AAC system. Asking for help and accommodations at work or in school. They need to have all of that programmed in to their systems and understand how to do that. And that's where you can do those co-planned scripts and get them put in there. But you've got to think about that. And then hopefully they're securing a job or employment and all the supports that they need in this last year. I know that I like to always have a 3-ring binder that had information about the device, who the manufacturer is, the contact information. I would print, if the parents wanted it, the manual to the device, or I would show them where they can find it in the app or the software. And then we would also talk about those other support services. So if the device is needing to be replaced, you're going to have to find a community SLP. How would you do that? So that's all the things that you want to think about that you're leaving this family, this student with, so that they have the knowledge on what to do once they age out of the school system. Next slide, please. Okay, 1 year prior still, they need to also work on work time management skills. And I'm at the university setting, and that, carries into their 20s. I probably am still working on that a little bit too, but they need to think about transportation, and it's going to take a little longer. And how long does that take to get that set up and your appointment set up, and all those social activities? Because when you're young, you should be out moving and a grooving, right? And they need to start assuming what they can for their healthcare needs. So if they are capable, they should start learning how to, call the doctor, how to call the dentist, how to call their specialists. And of course, they need to register to vote and for selective service when they turn 18. So those are all things in that last year to be considering. And hopefully as a team, you're all looking at that and figuring out who would support it, those different items on the checklist, the best. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go ahead and just give you some concrete ways to do this. And one of the suggestions in the book that I pulled this material out of is MAPS. It used to be called something planning process, but now they just call it MAPS. But it's just really starting with that student story, who they are, and then using guiding questions to ask the person to share the milestones to assist with that planning that they're hoping for. The MAPS process allows persons to just dig in a little deeper, and I think it allows the team to dig in a little deeper and start making some action steps and working towards that individual's dream. So if we can go to the next Courtney, are you able to show this link? Click on this maps example. So this comes from inclusion.com. And as you can see here, this is just like a poster. It doesn't have to be very, very, formal. They just start with the student story, number 1 in the cloud over here. Yep. And so you're going to list down. And so this is an individual who has this. They use this device. These are what they like and love. And then you go on to what's the ultimate dream? What is their dream for adulthood? And you're going to put it there. So what do they want to be doing after school? Is there a particular vocation? Is there, a trip? Where do they want to live? Who do they want to live with? What community places or activities do they want to do? All of those transition questions we have to ask. And then this one I like, it also lists what would be the ultimate nightmare. If we don't work on this, what is a nightmare? And I think when you're working with this age population, it's good to have that comparison. Well, you could just stay living with mom and dad for the rest of your life. And, how fun would that be? So once you kind of look at that story in the dream, what would be bad if we don't take these steps, then you can start with the contributions. So who do we need helping support to get to this dream? Once you go through who you need on that team, then you go into step 5 in this arrow. What is it going to take? And then finally, you start with action agreements. So who, what, and by whom. And if you scroll down, I think there's one more picture. There we go. So they've got a nice example, and this gentleman just created his own maps, and his name was Anthony, and he wanted to change band memberships. So band was important, and they identified who's going to support him. Here was who he is, and this one kind of goes when he's 19, 22, 25, what he's hoping for. His dream was to not just perform at school, but, to get out into the community and perform. His nightmare looks like he would lose an arm. So that would be hard because you couldn't perform anymore. But then they just start looking at, okay, what supports do you need? How do we get there? And then they made an action plan. And if you scroll up, Courtney, for me, if you just look at this website, they have paths. Keep going all the way to the top. Stop there and scroll down on the right-hand side here. I just want to show you. They also have this person-centered planning. They have the path network. Yeah, you could click there. They talk about maps. And if you want to scroll down, this explains all of them. Yeah, keep going. And then they also talk about circles of development. So there's a couple of other ways to look at and create this plan. And this is inclusive.com is a wonderful website just to review. If you keep scrolling down, then you've got your maps that we just looked at. Keep scrolling down. And then we have the circle of friends and support. And I really like this because this kind of ties into an evaluation out there called social networks, but really looking outside the school and who is in that intimate, very middle circle to friendships, to participants. And then, that fourth circle, people that are just maybe exchanging information and thinking about supports that way. Okay, if we can go back to the PowerPoint. And we will go on to slide 25. One more down. So I just want to go through a case study with you on how you can use an organization system like MAPS or PATH or Circle of Friends. And the book had this one about CK, who's 18 years old, and he was living in Chicago with his 75-year-old grandmother. Oh, can we go? Yeah. And he's using an AAC device. He has an adapted computer and a power wheelchair, and he's very social. He's got tons of friends in school and in the neighborhood, and he is on the school newspaper. So let's just think about that MAPS process and what we could think about for CK transitioning from school So let's go to the next page and we'll show you. Here was a Dare to Dream poster that CK's team created. So it's not exactly maps, but it's similar. You know, from that story, what he determined as his dream was he wanted to live with a buddy, a friend, in an apartment in Colorado and be a writer for a national news paper station, something. His nightmare could be just staying with his 75-year-old grandmother in Chicago, no college and no job opportunities. He didn't want that. He wanted to move on and get training and get a career. So as you can see on this poster, he drew an apartment building because he wants to live independently. You know, he also wanted to continue friendship. So you see he's got people talking back and forth to each other. Hey, what's up? And then he's got a picture of the Gazette, a newspaper, because he wants to get a job somewhere in journalism. So how is he going to get there? Well, let's figure out what this team decided. Let's go to the next slide. So here's what he wanted to do. Live on his own, work for a national news station, and when not working, he wants to communicate with friends. He wants to keep up that social. How is he going to do that? Next slide. Okay, so kind of like the maps, this Dare to Dream action plan now takes his dream and you start looking at what are the next steps, or I love how they listed on here on the slide, or role if they're a wheelchair user. What are the resources they have to put in place? I'm, guessing they might need to have some personal care attendants helping him, out in Colorado. Who are the people that they need to be contacting? What are the places that he may need to go? Like maybe he needs to do some college visits if he's going to go on for journalism. So this is just another way to represent those action steps. So next slide, let's talk about what this team did. All right, before graduation, here's what he needs to learn to do. He needs to be able to manage those technologies on his own. He's got to be able to manage his personal assistant services, PASs. He needs to manage transportation and healthcare. He's going to need a part-time job or an internship because clearly he needs some money. He has to manage finances, and he needs to learn how to live independently with that PAS support. Okay, next slide, please. They also identified doing this that he needs to explore some more interests, employment, and post-secondary opportunities. I mean, it's great that he wants to write or work for a newsroom, but how does he do that? Who offers it? He's already picked his state for some reason. Who knows why? So let's start educating him and his support services right now. He should be learning about sexual and relationship roles and responsibilities if he's going to live independently. Figure out those supports and accommodations that he will need in a workplace where he's living. Also, if he's going on to school, college, and how is he going to self-advocate? And as an SOP, I think that's a big one. And then he's got to learn what services and benefits are available, which is also huge, because that's what's going to help him obtain these goals and dreams of his. So the team took all those needs and then they decided to build some goals. So next slide, let's look at what they determined for goals. So CK is going to work on directing his personal assistant in his charge using his AAC device. So clearly a lot of that may also be determining what messages need to be on there if they're not already, or finding where those messages are and making sure he knows how to use them. They also determined that he needs to answer science and health questions regarding safe sex and demonstrating understanding of the concepts. So that's an academic goal to build in there, but he's using his AAC system, right? So he can show his knowledge. They also determined that he's going to have pre-program his device with responses to job interview questions. And then also he will discuss with the voc rehab counselor how much income he can earn before he loses his Medicaid health insurance, which that's huge. You've got to understand those dynamics because he's likely needing the health care. Okay, next slide. So besides going through this process and coming up with goals and objectives, one of the things for my teams that I worked with was always having that backup system, because technology fails, and it always fails at the worst time. So some of the ideas that we used in the St. Cloud school system, especially when COVID hit, was we just made sure that students that had a dedicated system and a customized language system already, we would work with the families and the student and get screenshots of the most needed pages, and then we would put them in a binder. We wouldn't screenshot every single page because that might become an Encyclopedia Britannica, but what's really important, when that device needs to be charged or it's out for repair. We had some students that we, as a school district, we had our own core board that we created, and then we created just tops that flipped fringe vocabulary, just tabbed pages on top so that they could use that. We started with those a lot of times before we move on and figure out what the higher tech system might be needed. So we always made sure we had something like that. You can get out those old Go Talk 20s and 32s or Super Talkers, the mid-tech recordable devices, and kind of same thing as the screenshots. Maybe you just find the most important boards and get those recorded and have that as the backup. If you've got somebody using eye gaze, you can do a manual eye gaze board so that they can look at, messages, or you could do partner assisted scanning. So this could be where you actually have a book and you go through choices and they indicate somehow yes, no, or maybe you just do it auditorily and say, here's your 3 choices. If you don't want any of them, pick another, and then you go through book, trampoline, exercise ball, something else. And you give them those choices and you wait for them to indicate yes or no. But always be thinking of a backup system for your clients too. Next slide. Okay, we will not be going through all of these resources, but we did want to leave you with supports that you can get more information. So we have just a list here of the different areas that if you've got a transitioning student, you can get more information, or families can get support.
Yeah, and I do want to just quickly talk about a couple of them, because the Disability Hub is something that's new that I think that teams and families really need to be aware of. It's kind of a one-stop shop for someone to go to find all the resources. So if a family doesn't have a social worker, for example, or they need just some additional assistance, they can use this Disability Hub to really help them find resources. And one of the coolest ones that I heard about just a couple of weeks ago was they have it's almost like a dating app where you have a match. So if you have a PCA looking for work and a family looking for a PCA, you can go on this and you can kind of see if you match up with somebody. So that, because that's often one of the hardest things is finding PCAs for these individuals that are living either in their own home with families, especially, but even in group homes, people looking for work. So that was kind of a cool thing that I didn't even know existed. And all of these places are linked for you. So Pacer has some really great resources. The Minnesota Disability Law Center is really great for advocating. The Department of Ed has great resources too. So, as you're looking to help teams figure out how to work on that independence, just know that these resources are there. And then around Minnesota and I think in North Dakota, it's a little tougher to find evaluations for AAC for adults. It's kind of a specialty area, as we all know. And so here's just a list of some places that do them. Courage County has a few sites around the Twin Cities, and I'm not sure if they go out state. I know in the Brainerd area, when you get into some of the healthcare systems, there are SLPs that do AAC. So I would encourage you to, if you're outstate, call and try to figure out if they do AAC evaluations and what systems they use. The MNSHA AAC repository will be coming out with a list of AAC providers in the state. A lot of them are school-based, but a lot of them are not. And so as you look around your area, you might be able to find a specialist there. Local universities, so like Mary's at St. Cloud State, there's clinical specialties that they do evaluations on site at the universities. So that's another resource.
Faultless too.
Duluth does, yep. St. Cloud does. I think Mankato. So that's another option. And what I didn't put on here, but I should, and it, is technology for home. If somebody is on as an adult on waivers and county, and they have medical assistance and they have county waiver services, they might qualify for Tech for Home, and that is in-home assistive technology assessments, and that is statewide. So anywhere in the state, as long as we don't cross the border, Tech for Home can come. So that's another option, and that's through state grant and waiver services.
This is Courtney. I'm just going to jump in and add a little bit of information about North Dakota.
Yes, thank you.
So unfortunately, the North Dakota speech and language ASHA equivalent, I forget the acronym right now, doesn't have a list of providers who provide AAC assessments. I was able to confirm that All True Health, the Ann Carlson Center, UND, and Sanford Health all have providers who do AAC evaluations. This certainly isn't exhaustive, but those are some that I know for sure. If you need additional information or help finding somebody, please feel free to contact North Dakota Assistive, and we'll try and get you set on the right path.
Thanks. Thank you. And I will say, if you do contact a clinic, ask them what vendors they work with, because if they say we only work with Top3 or we only work with Tobii Dynavox, you may not get as thorough of a video evaluation if you travel to a specialty clinic center. And again, staff change over there. So just because one time they have some people that only know one vendor doesn't mean a year later they're going to not have, we strive to educate and learn and know better as AAC specialists. So feel free to ask those kind of questions and to ask, what they consider. Access is a really tough thing to assess. And a lot of times we jump right from direct select to eye gaze and we forget about all the wonderful things in between. Like Mary was talking about partner assisted scanning, that can be huge with a switch, and just knowing switch access and things like that is really important when you're looking at a thorough evaluation, if there are physical access considerations. Okay, here are some options too when you're looking at, so how do I do an AAC eval? One of the really cool things is most of the vendors now have really great templates online to help you as you're writing through, and it kind of also then walks you through, hey, you need to consider vision, you need to consider hearing, you need to consider access, you need to consider, are they going to need a mount of any kind? Do they need a key guard? What are their language skills? What are their cognitive skills? So the templates do help. But you can also go to like the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative. WADI has forms. There are all sorts of resources through MDE and DHS on the SET process and looking at those kinds of things. And then ASHA also has a speech generating device template. And then there are some other resources here that are all linked. So the FIATS is a really great one that I just recently found out about, but that really allows a family to fill out all the different aspects of communication and cognitive and daily needs, and kind of really helps you get to where is intervention important and what's important to have programmed on an AAC system. The pragmatics profile is another great one. When we start getting out into the world, it's not just about simple core vocabulary, but it's really looking at, how and why do I need to communicate and who with. And then Tech Connect has a forms and functions form that is really great. Does anybody want to add anything to those? Rebecca, you're muted.
The FIATS the family impact of AT is a really great way to bring parents into the equation and have important discussions about how AAC impacts home life and how they can help support things.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks. On the next slide, one of the big things that has been really playing into my intervention lately is families that are multilingual and bilingual and considerations around that. And there's some really great strides being made in this area, I have to say. But I was just working with a young lady right now who's got Down syndrome. Her family is from another culture, speaks a different language than English at home, but she really speaks English in school. And she did fine in school. And so the consideration of AAC wasn't really a big thing for her. But the case manager and the family were like, we can't communicate with her because she doesn't speak our native language. And when she graduates, she's in transition now, but when she graduates, she's going to be in her community with community members that don't speak English, with extended family that don't speak English. And all of a sudden, she's speaking English to them and they don't know what she needs. And so, looking at how can we accommodate and bridge that transition between languages, and think about who and where are they going to be communicating with when they get out of school. And if it's not just English and just simple functional, then, AAC can play a part in helping them be effective communicators. So The Fundamentals of AAC is a great book that will have some information. These are just some resources that I found that have really great information on bilingual and multilingual AAC. So Practical AAC has a blog. Asha has a great article about AAC literacy and bilingualism. Assistiveware has a bilingual AAC, some blogs and resources on that, as well as the bilingual speechy site. So those are just a few. If we go to the next slide, one of the things that has become really clear to me in working with a lot of families that are not English speakers, native English speakers, they might not have had the same access to technology and understanding of how to navigate systems that somebody who grew up around technology might or had access to technology. And so ease of programming becomes really important. Toggling between languages become really important. How are we able to toggle? And is it really true code switching? Angela Murad in Amazing Kids has a great article about code switching and which systems really do kind of switch the grammar to, and how do we think about that? Because as we know, languages aren't all the same in grammar as English. Spanish is one where, you do the article and the verbs different. And so being able to code switch is very important. One thing that's become really important lately for a lot of families I'm working with is being able to record on a button. So some AAC systems are easier to record on buttons than others. Some allow you to just push a microphone right while you are editing. And so you can take pictures of their food or record, like a Somali family I'm working with. There's daily prayers that they might have and things that they want on that system for their young adult to be able to participate in. And so being able to quickly record. In our district right now, we're starting to do a lot with free and low-cost AAC apps that we can put our core board on and then have it recorded in both English and another language. And then also to have advocacy boards, because new to country kids and around the world, everybody needs to say, I need the bathroom, I need some help, I want to stop, and so looking at basic advocacy phrases and can we record in 2 languages? So that's kind of another cool thing. What I didn't put on here, and I can add to one more minute for the whole presentation.
Yep.
Okay.
We can stay on for a couple more minutes,
Yep.
and if folks need to hop off, that is is totally up to them.
So
but
what
we
I'm
can
going to do
record
is
the
just
whole
send
session.
information on 3 free AAC apps.
We're going to go into that.
Yeah.
See this sample page. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can either have it be
Cheryl,
Yeah, Courtney, let's not play the video right now.
like
I
this.
didn't think that was.
Or
What I'm just gonna let you know is I will send information about how to do recording and adding video modeling for our DHH video.
I'm not
or
sure
you can
where.
do it like this all done, where you just record.
I think it might be coming
at
from
the same time.
not my computer.
All done. And the action on those is to play a library video that you've recorded ahead of time.
There we go.
I'll just briefly touch on these tools. These next 3 things, you might want to consider putting in something like the binder that Mary Baumann-Spooner was talking about for families. The personal dictionaries is just a way to outline to show the ways a person communicates if they are using non-traditional ways. Waving my hands might mean I'm anxious. And this is really important to get up on the wall or have it be very accessible for new caregivers. And this is a way to really help avoid behavior problems and assist the staff in understanding their student. Next slide, please. Talking mats is another way that you can that they have pre-made things that can be bought, or you could look at their examples and make them. It's a way to help anybody that needs help communicating make personal choices about their living situations and future work environments. This communication passports I particularly like because it's a way for young AAC users and young adults to say things that are really important to them, so they don't have to share that, or families, with every new caregiver that comes down the line. Like, these are my special people. These are things that cheer me up. These are things I like to talk about. This is what makes me really mad. And it's a good talking point. So that would be, and the links that are here are links that guide you through and actually allow you to create these different things for the students that you're working with. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to leave you with some top tips from our SLP who works in the 18 to 22-year-old program. She's what we call our closer. That's another tip for people in the schools. Get one of your best SLPs to work in that program and keep them there so they can really have a solid a system to support AAC users and send them out with what they need. And here are her top tips. Get them out in the real world, on the job, greeting someone every day, introduce themselves clearly, and communicating with peers and that multiple range of communication partners every day. Safety messages, super important. I need help. I'm lost. And not to just know where they are on the device, but to practice them, simulate situations in the community, so it's not a novel situation. Self-advocacy messages, like Mary was talking about. This is my AAC device. I need this to communicate. Our Deanna found that oftentimes job coaches would tell the students to put away their machines. It's time to work now. And they need to be the advocates to say, this is how I communicate. I need this out. And you got to practice these things. And again, to practice with your medical personnel at the school, so that they can tell doctors and nurses they feel sick, where do they hurt, body parts, and all those important messages. So top four tips from our closer in St. Paul schools. Well, that's all we have for you today. You are going to find links to everything that we talked about in the resource sheet and in the bibliographies. And we wanted you to know that you can get involved and work with us in the Minnesota Speech Language Hearing Association and our work going forward if you just email one of us. And please do email us if you have any questions as well. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you to our wonderful presenters. We appreciate your expertise, and I know that so many folks will learn a ton from this.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.